Welcome into the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, wishing you a Merry Christmas. Not a ton of on this date in Rockies history to recall on Christmas Day. Not a ton of Christmas events in general. Another first baseman, though, is off the board for the Rockies. Another designated for assignment Rocky is now back in DFA limbo. A Colorado native signs a deal to play in Japan. And as a whole, the state of the Colorado Rockies in the Pacific Rim, in Japan, in Korea, it hasn't been good. 2007 was the last time a Japanese-born player suited up for the Rockies. And then since then, only one player from either Taiwan or Korea has suited up for the Rockies. Is that about to change with this new front office? I did ask that question to Paul DePodesta in Orlando during the 2025 winter meetings, and his response will make you interested, to say the least, and a little bit on the history of Pacific Rim players with the Colorado Rockies. But as I said at the start of the pod, Christmas Day transactions don't really happen for Colorado, and you can't blame them. It doesn't really happen for a lot of teams. And certainly the Rockies right now have to get a lot of work done, right? They are behind the eight ball, and it's going to take time. And I don't necessarily think doing work right now during the Christmas week, New Year's week is going to move the needle a ton, especially when there's not a lot of other teams doing the same thing. So the Rockies would be on an island unto themselves. So are they doing work behind the scenes? Yes, absolutely. But are you going to see any transactions? I don't really think so. It just doesn't happen. Not a ton of notable transactions in general on December 25th in baseball history, period. There's like one. 2019, Edwin Encarnacion signed a $12 million deal with the White Sox. That's it. I mean, you could include 2001, Hideki Matsui signing a 1-year, $4.7 million deal with the Yomiuri Giants, a team he had been with for the duration of his pro career over in Japan, to make him the highest paid player over in NPB, surpassing what Ichiro's contract was at $4 million. But that's NPB. That's Japan. That's not Major League Baseball. There were two notable baseball games, believe it or not, that were played on Christmas Day. The first in 1862, a crowd of 40,000, which Civil War historians debate the size of that crowd. But apparently, according to Baseball Reference and their bullpen page, which they've got all kinds of events on all 366 days of the year. Don't forget February 29th. But a large crowd of maybe 40,000 watched two teams of imprisoned Union Army soldiers play baseball at Hilton Head in South Carolina. That's wild. And then in 1888, at the Pennsylvania State Agricultural Society, on the Pennsylvania State Fair buildings and grounds located at Broad Street in Lehigh Valley, not too far from where Citizens Bank Park is in Philly, the downtowners beat the uptowners in the first sanctioned indoor baseball game ever played. 6-1 downtowners win before a crowd of 2,000. So pretty interesting that there were two games of note in America that were played on Christmas Day. So we did get some news. I think it went down on Tuesday. It did. Ryan O'Hearn signing a 2-year, $29 million contract with the Pittsburgh Pirates, another first baseman off the board. The 32-year-old spent all of 2025 with the Orioles and Pirates, split time between them. Over his last 3 years, 5.9 wins above replacement. Not bad. It is strange, though, that a first baseman in 2025, or really almost in any era, in those 3 years has only hit 46 home runs and recorded 182 RBI. Does have 122 OPS plus in that span, which is solid, but it could seem like a premium, $29 million for a player reaching free agency for the first time at age 32. Also, before these past 2 years, before 2024, he had never played more than 115 games in a season. He's never hit 20 home runs in a season. He's never reached 65 RBI in a season. So it is strange a little bit. And for a power position like first base, not great. He does make a lot of contact, which is similar to Luis Arraez, which a lot of people are banging the drum on. And I sort of said in jest, I don't know if it was in August or September, that with the amount of conversation the Rockies and Warren Schaefer in particular were having about needing more contact, I thought, well, Luis Arraez, his value is down just a little bit, and I don't think he's going to get a qualifying offer. He didn't, so it's not going to cost the Rockies a draft pick if they sign him. And it just seemed like maybe his better days were past him, especially since he's not really a second baseman anymore. First baseman that puts the ball in play is nice, but not for a first baseman. And so with a lack of defensive flexibility, I sort of thought, you know what, I could really see the Rockies falling in love with Luis Arraez, being a notable name. He is from Venezuela, could partner really well with Ezequiel Tovar. Is that one of the attractive reasons why Thairo Estrada was brought in last year to play second base and be part of a double play duo with Tovar? Remains to be seen. But I sort of said it in jest that Luis Arraez is going to be the guy that they fall in love with. And considering the fact that he probably won't break the bank, it's true. It's true. I think the Rockies really very well could have a lot of interest in Luis Arraez, but as I've been saying, I think the Rockies might wait for the last man standing or get very close to that. Once you get down to the last 2 or 3 first basemen, then it might benefit them to be a little more aggressive and go out and say, oh, all right, we'll chip in an extra $2 million over the course of 2 or 3 years, but we're not going to go a 4th year, right? You have to pay somewhat of a premium this early in the offseason for sure. And now the Pittsburgh Pirates, they've got a lineup that looks a lot deeper with the addition of now Ryan O'Hearn. Last week, Brandon Lau to play second base, not to mention improvements in outfield depth with the Jostinson Garcia, a.k.a. the password, young 23-year-old outfielder from the Red Sox that they got in a trade. So Pittsburgh trying to do their thing. White Sox continuing to do their thing after signing Munetaka Murakami to a 2-year, $34 million deal. I think that's going to be the steal of the offseason. Sure, there's a lot of swing and miss in there, but playing league average first base, hitting 40 home runs, and having a guy that still could be making a lot of growth at his age, that could just end up being a real big bargain for them. But the White Sox signed lefty Sean Newcomb to a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. Why is that important? Well, Newcomb is a lefty reliever, and to make room on the 40-man roster, unfortunately, Ryan Rolison designated for assignment again, his 3rd time in the past few weeks. First, of course, by the Rockies, then by Atlanta, and now the Chicago White Sox. So he is going to have to wait for his next suitor. Drew Romo, who's also been designated for assignment 3 times. No, actually, no, he's only been designated assignment 2 times, and he's with his 3rd team. He's with the Mets right now until something changes. We'll see what happens. Bobby Dalbec is a name you may or may not be familiar with, former Boston Red Sox. He's a graduate of Parker High School, Parker, Colorado, just south of Denver. He's going overseas. He's going to play in Japan. Signed a 1-year deal worth a reported $1 million to play for the Yomiuri Giants, the biggest baseball team over in Japan. Now, why go to Japan? Why should Bobby Dalbec be playing over there or consider something like that, especially since it's only $1 million? Well, it's $1 million guaranteed money, and it's playing time. And that's not anything that Bobby Dalbec was going to be guaranteed in 2026. It's what a lot of players who go to Korea or go to Japan get. Certainty that they are going to make this money. They are going to get regular playing time and not have to deal with promotion, option, designated for assignment, changing franchises, changing cities. That can happen a lot when you are a fringe big leaguer, when you're a fringe 40-man type of player. And even if you're not sitting in AAA, which a lot of these guys can, even if you make it to the majors, and again, if you're going back and forth from AAA to the majors, you're not making full-time big league money. And even if you are making full-time big league money, like Paul Skeens the past 2 years, you're making $780,000. That's it. You get $780K in 2026. And again, it's not guaranteed. But now Bobby Dalbec goes to Japan. It's guaranteed. And as we've been seeing this offseason, we've been seeing it for a while, but a lot of American-born players are going over to Japan and Korea to reestablish their value, reestablish themselves improve their value, and then they come back stateside and get themselves a nice deal. Cody Ponce with the 3 years, $30 million, did it not even in Japan, did it in Korea. So you can really improve your value and improve your future by going over and playing in the Pacific Rim. And that's one of the reasons, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. That's one of the reasons where the Rockies need to get into that market, because it's not just the players from Japan, it's the players that are in Japan now and the adjustments that they've made and the improvements that they've made and the lessons that they've learned from and having to go halfway across the world in order to ply their trade. That's going to change you, usually for the better. And if you don't have boots on the ground, which as of right now, the Rockies do not have in Japan, Korea, or Taiwan, is that going to change? Stick around. Another guy crossing the pond, the Pacific pond, not the Atlantic pond, going to England, is Harold Castro. Remember that name? He's going to be playing in 2026 with KBO's Kia Tigers. Now, how about this one? The last 3 years have been so long, if you're a Rockies fan, or if you've been covering the Rockies, the last 3 years have been so long, you might really have to think, Harold Castro. Yeah, he's a Rocky. I know him. When did he last play with the Rockies? When was that? How long ago was that? And if it wasn't last year, which I think you know that, right? It wasn't last year. When was it? It was 2024, right? Or was it 2023? It could have been 2022. It wasn't 2021, right? The answer is 2023. Just wild to think about, right? 2024, after his stint with the Rockies, did play in the Mexican League. And then this past year in 2025, spent the entirety of it in AAA with the Royals, AAA affiliate in Omaha, and did quite well. 307 batting average, 21 homers, 65 RBI. And one other tidbit, Shawn O'Malley. You might not know that name, but he was named assistant hitting coach by the Washington Nationals and played parts of 3 seasons in the majors with the Angels, with his somewhat hometown team of the Seattle Mariners. I bring him up because he was on the 2018 Albuquerque Isotopes. The hardcore fans of the Rockies might remember that name, or the hardcore Albuquerque Isotopes fans know that name. And oddly enough, if you go over to his baseball reference page, his profile picture is with a Rockies cap, despite not ever playing with the Rockies in the majors. I spoke with him once or twice when I went down there. That was my first year covering the Rockies, was 2018. And I can recall talking to him about his stint with the Angels and what that was like. And he did have nothing but glowing words to say about Albert Pujols, who was very kind to him when he came up, made his debut, took great care of all the guys in the clubhouse. So congratulations to Shawn O'Malley for getting that position. So going up in Orlando, going up to Paul DePodesta's suite, one of the questions I had on my mind, and I didn't know if there was going to be enough time to get to it, but Paul did a great job over the course of 30 minutes or so. It might have been more than that. It flew by, but everyone had a question or two to get in there, and mine was one of the last ones when we were getting down to the nitty gritty, and I can tell that the momentum was sort of running out of steam with some of the questions. But I asked about the Rockies' state of scouting in Japan, in Korea, because it's been non-existent. They haven't had any scouts on the ground, and they haven't been players in the market. 2007, as I said, was the last time a Japanese-born player had suited up for the Rockies, and that was Kaz Matsui. It was a great season, too. One of the best for any second baseman in Rockies franchise history. And then Sung-Won Oh in the final 2 months of 2018 and then 2019. That's been it. They just haven't been players in that market. They haven't been investing in that market. What did Paul DePodesta have to say? Quote, I absolutely think it's important. We've talked about, a necessity for us to be sort of active in every possible avenue to acquire talent. So whether it's Latin America, whether it's Asia, whether it's the waiver wire, you have major league free agent trades. I mean, all of it. I think we have to be actively involved in all of those to try to find some potential solutions for us. And so I do think that's an area where we'll probably ramp up our efforts to some degree. And then he added something about his youngest son may volunteer because he loves Japan. So that's promising. That's saying the right thing and having a little bit more behind it than, yes, we would like to, or yeah, there's a lot of good players over there. It was more than that, right? It was a lot more, or it was more than this time last year at the winter meetings when apparently Bill Schmidt was one of the first people to call about and inquire on Roki Sasaki. That's it. It just called, just inquired. Not much. We know that did not come to fruition, but perhaps there really is going to be a change. And there's some notable numbers too that I have on players coming out of Japan that I you know what, I'll get to right now because I just did a quick search and I was really curious. Since 2007, how many players have come over from Japan, just Japan, since 2007? I think the number is 56. There's 56, or excuse me, 59 Japanese-born players from 2008 until 2025, and there's going to be a couple new ones for 2026. Let's not forget, but 59 and counting since the end of 2007. 44 of those actually came to the U.S. for the first time, and you know, I'm not going to say the numbers are staggering, but you do have 20 All-Star game appearances from those 44 players who debuted in 2008 or later. On the offensive side, we're talking about 502 home runs that have come from Japanese-born players and 215.6 wins above replacement. 215.6 wins above replacement. A good majority of those coming from pitchers, but still a lot coming from position players as well. 154 came from pitchers who have racked up nearly 11,000 strikeouts from 2008 through 2025 in just under 11,000 innings pitched. 139 saves, 685 wins. In fact, you know, I said 20 Japanese-born players have made the All-Star game since 2008, who have debuted since 2008. 19 of them have been pitchers. So you may have to really rack your brain and go, wow, there was only one Japanese-born position player who's made an All-Star game since debuting in 2008. And I believe he started that game. You thinking about it? I'm stalling for you to rack your brain. When I say it, you'll remember it. But dude was just an absolute flash in the pan. And I can't even remember how many years he stayed in the league. I want to say maybe he had 5 years in the league. And the answer is 5. Finished up with the White Sox in 2012, but he got his start in 2008, coincidentally. It was Kosuke Fukudome. Remember that name? Yeah, I mean, he was good his first 3 years and then just totally fell off. He was in his age 31 season when he made his debut, so he was a little bit older. So it's mostly been pitching that Japan has been providing Major League Baseball. And the one area in which the Rockies need more help than any, the one area that they've always needed the most help, is pitching. So it would stand to reason that the Rockies would be wise to bulk up their investment over in Japan in a major way. Now, only 5 Japanese-born players have ever played for the Colorado Rockies, believe it or not. And the first 2, well, 2 of the first 3 were Americans that were born in Japan, similar to like Dave Roberts. But Dave Roberts, I believe his mother is Japanese. Jeff McCurry and Craig House were, I believe, born on Air Force bases over in Japan. Jeff McCurry, 1997, made his debut with the Rockies. Craig House in 2000. Masato Yoshii actually debuted before Craig House, also in the year 2000. Max Suzuki, younger guy, in 2001. And then, of course, Kaz Matsui, who was great. Was good in 2006, great in 2007. And, you know, these are players that contributed to the Rockies and other teams. And some of the Japanese players who've come over have been outstanding. We know. I don't need to mention Shohei Ohtani. And there have been others that haven't really made an impact. But a lot of those guys who have made an impact, there hasn't been a major investment in them. There are players who come over each and every year that really fly under the radar. And some of them are only getting about $1 million, $2 million. And there are other players that are getting a couple million that end up far exceeding what that investment has been made by their team. Give me one moment. Hope I didn't lose you there. Technical difficulties should be good to go now. So Masato Yoshii, 1 season with the Rockies in 2000. And this was a time pre-Humidor where you could post a 5.86 ERA like Masato Yoshii posted and still have an ERA plus of 99 and still be worth 1.1 wins above replacement. And again, this was an era where wins above replacement didn't really exist. You know, a lot of teams had their own evaluation systems behind the scenes. In fact, every team does. And I have heard from people within the Rockies organization that that Colorado is the only team in the majors that does not have their own evaluation structure, like their own version of WAR. And had they had such a thing at that time, perhaps they would have held on to a Yoshi who was worth 1.1 wins above replacement. Instead, they released him, and you go, all right, 5.86 ERA, okay, but giving a little bit of context, of course, when you pitch at Coors Field, I think is really important to understand that and figure out, okay, what actually makes for a successful player in Denver or on the road. And so that's something that the Rockies need to do. And I imagine under Paul DePodesta, they are going to want to do that. Absolutely. And it's funny with Yoshi's season, you think, okay, well, maybe he just wasn't really good at Coors Field and he was better on the road, similar to Chase Dollander, who was really bad at Coors Field, had a couple bad breaks, but the numbers at Coors Field were not good. The numbers on the road were really solid. I think it's 3.87, something like that, ERA on the road. So you go, oh wow, there's something there. Well, you could argue there's something there for Masato Yoshii, who had a 5.87 ERA on the road, not good at sea level, but then at home, only a 5.85 ERA. That's going to keep you in a couple games at Coors Field. And again, pre-Humidor, that did keep them in a few games. He was 2-3 at home. So we know kill the win. We know that wins aren't huge for starting pitchers, but in an era in which wins were still important, wins were still valuable, you can look and say he was 2-3 at home because a 5.85 ERA is going to keep you in games in a pre-Humidor Coors Field, but a 5.87 ERA on the road, 4 wins to 12 losses, definitely puts things in that proper perspective. And Kaz Matsui is the guy that is still beloved by a lot of Rockies fans for what he was able to do down the stretch in 2007. Still one of the best seasons by a second baseman in Rockies history. You could argue it was the best. 3.4 wins above replacement. And he was only healthy for 104 games, but really turned it on in the postseason in the major way. And the Rockies didn't have to give up a ton for him either. It was a trade, Eli Marrero. So I believe the Rockies are still I don't want to say they're the only team, but the Rockies still have yet to sign a player directly out of Japan. All of the players that they acquired were either via trade or were scooped up after they had already come over from Japan. So that is something new they are looking to do. And there are other teams that don't sign a ton of players from Asia or directly from Asia. In fact, I believe the last Japanese-born player before Munetaka Murakami signed by the Chicago White Sox, you'd have to go back all the way to Tadahito Iguchi in 2005. So Chicago, a market where there have been a lot of Japanese players, at least on the north side, some on the south side, but signing directly from Japan, that's a different ballgame. That's a different type of investment. You really need to know and really need to have belief that a certain player is going to be able to transition over to the States. The Rockies have to invest in order to be able to figure out if player A is going to be able to do that. If we're talking about Korean ball players, there have only been 3 for the Rockies. Sungwon Oh, who was very serviceable as a reliever in 2018 and 19, more 18 than 19. Byung-Young Kim, who became a starting pitcher again all of a sudden in Colorado. Tough assignment there from 2005 to 2007. And then Sun Woo Kim, 2005 through 2006. And then one player from Taiwan who I could probably do a whole video on, Chin-hui Tsao, who was the second major league player to come out of Taiwan to play in Major League Baseball, first pitcher to do so. He was actually signed really young by the Rockies. I think he was 18 years old. He was an undrafted free agent, which is kind of a rarity to sign a young player directly out of the Pacific Rim. Those players usually will go and play in the league for their country or in another, a better league in that area, right? Before trying to come over to the United States. But after a couple seasons with the Rockies, one in which he threw 100 miles an hour, he had a pitch clock. He's still the only Taiwanese pitcher to do that, I believe. But he went back to playing in Taiwan in the Chinese Professional Baseball League, and he was under investigation for fixing a couple games. And he was never indicted, but he was expelled from the league in 2009 and then ended up coming back into the majors ever so briefly with the Dodgers. So go figure on that one. So baseball in Japan has never been more relevant in the majors and Major League Baseball, and I think some of that has to do with the World Baseball Classic and getting, American fans familiarized with Japanese players. There was, I want to this off season talk a little bit about baseball cards. I have an episode or a part of the episode about baseball cards because it's still a booming and thriving hobby right now in an industry, and thought it would be interesting to. I'm not going to dive into it, but I don't know if you heard this one, but for the first time, a Shohei Ohtani card sold for over $1 million, and you would have thought, oh, that probably should have happened by now. Hadn't, but it now has happened, and it wasn't sold for $1 million. It was actually sold for $3 million. So the Ohtani market still going strong. And Japanese players, the baseball market over in the NPB and KBO is still really strong. And the Rockies have really punted on that player pool for so long, just saying, hey, we're a draft and develop team. And what that meant was, to me, it meant a lot of things. And I think to a lot of Rockies fans, they can read between the lines as to what it means. But one of the things that it meant was that we are ruling out all other avenues of player acquisition. If something falls into our lap, sure, we'll take it. But we're essentially ruling everything else out. And as you heard from that quote from Paul DePodesta, from the question that I asked him in Orlando earlier in the month about getting back into those markets, that's important. They can't rule out those markets anymore. They've got to be players. They don't have to be the biggest players, but you can still get value from these guys that are hungry, that they want to make their mark in the United States. And perhaps they are going to take less than an American free agent who is going through the arbitration system and is making, some really good money. If you look at a player like a Brendan Rodgers, who a Brendan Rodgers quality player from Japan might not necessarily come over to the United States. And one of the reasons for that is, Brendan Rodgers in his career as an American-born player, first off was the 3rd overall pick in the 2015 MLB draft, notable signing bonus. So he's made some money in his career. And made in arbitration $3.2 million in 2024. I was supposed to make more than that before he was non-tendered by the Rockies, made $2 million last year with the Astros. And so there's a certain dollar figure that you have to pay for a player of that caliber. And when you haven't even proven that much, even though you might be on that same plane, that same level coming from Japan, if you're compared to a Brendan Rodgers, well, you're going to get pennies on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar. So you're not going to make as much, but that you're hungry. You want to prove that you can be an average or an above average second baseman like a Brendan Rodgers, at least as of a couple years ago. And so, you know what? If you got to take only $1 million guarantee for a year or 2 years, $3 million to prove yourself because you're still young, and then now I can go back out into the market again and make more money after I've proven myself, then you're going to take that kind of a deal, even from a team like the Colorado Rockies. So there's definitely a lot of potential for Colorado to make an impact in that market and find some players. And I don't think it would take a notable investment. It might take some time to make that kind of investment over in Japan and in Korea. And I kind of found it funny. This was on Reddit, and I should have jotted it down in my notes. I didn't. And there was someone who conducted a survey, and they posted this on Reddit about the most popular teams in each prefecture in Japan, which is sort of like, you know, the states. And almost all of them were Dodgers. There was one for the Cubs, and then there was one that was split between the Mets and the Dodgers. But then when you broke it down even further than that, where in each of these prefectures there are even smaller sections, I think I've got that right, there were actually 3 that favored the Rockies. And it didn't have anything to do with Kaz Matsui, believe it or not, because I think he's from the Tokyo area, so, or maybe it was Osaka, but it didn't have anything to do with Kaz Matsui. So there are, you know, some areas of Tokyo that for whatever reason there's a pocket, and again, it might be a small area, it might be something like the size of a Wyoming, and I say area as in population, but you know, the Rockies could make some noise over in Japan. You know, one of the biggest things from the Shohei Ohtani signing was that the Dodgers felt that, you know, his face and his image everywhere all over Japan. And what comes with that is the Dodgers name and their brand recognition, that even when they signed the deal, that deal had already paid for itself. I don't know how they calculated that. Again, maybe it's just free advertising. You got Shohei Ohtani wearing the Dodgers jersey. They get a cut of that. And also, how much money would that advertising be worth to be on the billboard in Tokyo or wherever else, right? That's worth a lot of money. And for what they're paying Shohei Ohtani, they're getting all that kind of free advertising over there. That's profit, right? That's the business side of baseball. But the Rockies, I think more importantly than anything else, need to improve on the baseball side of things, and undervalued Japanese players who are really good and could contribute, whether they're position players or certainly if they are pitchers. The Rockies need to become players in that market. And according to Paul DePodesta, they're very much going to be players, much more so than they've been in the past. And that is absolutely a positive thing. At Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, and the Rockies Insider over on YouTube. Appreciate you dropping by. Subscribe, leave a review if you're listening to this on the podcast side of things. Those kind of things can go a super long way, and so I'd really appreciate it. That's my holiday wish. So please make that come true. Appreciate your time and appreciate all of your momentum. But unfortunately, as you know, that kind of momentum is only as good as my next show. So of course, I'll talk to you then.